So welcome to part 2 of lecture 2, Introduction of Physics. So in this video, we're going to discuss some of the concepts related to vectors. So quantities in physics may either be scalar or a vector. So when we say scalar quantities, they are quantities which are described by the magnitude and their respective units, while vectors is described by magnitude, appropriate units, and with direction. So, ibig sabihin, vector quantities are quantities which can be associated with direction, while if that quantity cannot be associated with direction, then that quantity is a scalar quantity. So, let us look at the common examples. So, for example, for scalar quantities, we have the temperature. So, temperature is measured in degrees Celsius. So, for example, 39 degrees Celsius. Now, can we associate the direction? Can we associate direction to the measure of temperature? So, can we describe 39 degrees Celsius north or 39 degrees Celsius east? So, it doesn't make sense. So, therefore, temperature cannot be associated with direction. The same with time. So, wala naman tayong time na 1 hour north, 1 hour east, diba? The same with other scalar quantities. So, ibig sabihin, scalar quantities are quantities which cannot be associated with direction. So, ang description lang niya is the magnitude and the respective units of that magnitude. While for vector, these are the common examples. We have weight, velocity, force, displacement, acceleration, momentum, and torque. So, for example, si force. So, when, for example, we applied 10 newtons to one side of an object. So, of course, the direction of the force is to the direction is the same with the direction where you applied the force. So, for example, nag-apply ka ng 10 newtons east, then the direction is of the force is east. So, velocity naman is when you apply direction to the speed. So, kapag nag-apply ka na ng direction to the magnitude of speed, then that is not a speed, that becomes velocity. And velocity, for example, a car moving 7 kilometers per hour due north. So, ibig sabihin, 17 kilometers per hour north yung velocity niya. Pero kapag speed lang, ang description niya lang is 7 kilometers per hour, walang direction. So, again, vector quantities are quantities which can be described by its magnitude, appropriate units, and the associated direction, while scalar quantities is described only by the magnitude and their respective units. To represent a vector, we use a line with an arrowhead. So, arrowed line. And then, the direction of the arrowhead indicates the direction of the quantity. So, for vector A, the direction is east. For vector B's direction is west. So, kung nakaturo naman siya up, pataas, the direction is north. Kung pababa, the direction is south. And then, relative to the north, east, west, south na line, pwedeng ang direction din niya is northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. The length of the arrow is scaled to be proportional to the magnitude of the vector quantity it represents. So, for example, we have here vector A and vector B. So, vector A is shorter than vector B. So, meaning the magnitude of vector A is less than vector B. So, meaning kapag maiksi lang yung arrow ng vector, ibig sabihin, mababa din yung value ng magnitude. Kapag mahaba yung arrow, ibig sabihin, malaki din yung magnitude nung vector mo or nung quantity. Vector quantities are denoted by a letter. So, usually capital letter with an arrowhead above the letter or a boldface letter. So, ito, pwede yung i-represent yung vector using a capital letter with an arrowhead above or using a boldface letter. So, i-control B nyo. So, naka-bold face yung letter. So, that denotes a vector quantity. While the magnitude of a vector is represented by a light-faced letter without an arrowhead on top, excuse me. So, again, so magnitude of a vector is represented by a light-faced letter without an arrowhead on top, or the symbol of the vector placed inside a vertical bar, vertical sign. So, ganito. So, ito diba, naka-bold siya. So, kapag naka-light face naman siya, ang ibig sabihin niya, that symbol symbolizes the magnitude of a vector. O kaya naman, to represent the magnitude of a vector, we can place this vector symbol within a vertical bar, or we can place this bold-faced letter within a vertical bar. So, yun yung representation ng magnitude of a vector. So, how do we locate, or how do we determine the direction of a vector? So, the direction of a vector is the acute angle it creates with the east-west line, or the acute angle it creates with respect to the x-axis, or with respect to the horizontal axis. So, take note that the acute angles are angles less than 90 degrees. So, in this case, for the vector, the acute angle is measured with respect to the x-axis or the east-west line. So, if we have this diagram, so this is our east-west line. Ayan, so horizontal, yung x-axis natin, that is the east-west line. So, ang ano natin, ang acute angle natin is measured, so, with respect to this horizontal line. So, if the arrow is pointing towards the northeast, then our acute angle is this side. So, ibig sabihin, the arrow is found north of east. So, this is the angle. So, dito naman, the vector A is found north of west. And then, dito, the vector is found south of west. And dito naman, south of east. Sorry. The letter N, or north, and south, and S out, south, is written after the measure of the angle, followed by the praise of E for east and of W for west. So, for example, 60 degrees S of W. So, this is the measure of angle followed by south, or kung yung direction is north, then north ang ilalagay mo dyan, and followed by of W or of E. So, in this example, 60 degrees south S of W means that starting from west, you go down by 60 degrees. So, balik tayo dun sa dito. So, ibig sabihin that the direction of the arrow for that particular example is starting from the west line. So, yan, starting from the west line. The arrow is 60 degrees south of west. Yan, so dyan siya mahanap. So, with respect to the west line. So, example. So, let's determine the mga direction of vector A and direction of vector B. So, si vector A, nakita natin that it is directed north of east. So, paano na yun natin isusulat yung yung direction niya? So, the direction of vector A, sabi natin, ayan, so with respect to the east line, vector A is 30 degrees north of the east line. So, therefore, kapag sinulat natin, A is 30 degrees N of E. While si B naman, with respect to the east-west line, so, since andito siya sa may west line, with respect to the west line, vector B is 45 degrees south of west. Yan. So, let's answer the following. So, let's determine the direction of the vectors A, B, C, and D. So, ano kaya yung direction nitong mga vectors? So, you can pause this video and then go back kapag nasagutan nyo na yung itong activity na to. Okay, so, to answer this activity, vector A with respect to the east line is 50 degrees 50 degrees north of the east line. So, A is 50 degrees north of east, while B, so ang reference naman natin dito with respect to the west line, so B is 45 degrees. 45 degrees north of the west line. So, ang answer is 45 degree N of W. So, C naman is 20 degrees south of the east line. So, pababa, south of the east line. And then, D is simply south, directed south. So, how do we represent vectors in graphs? So, step 1, so we can do the following steps. We create a Cartesian plane and then identify to which quadrant in the Cartesian plane will the vector lies using the given direction of the vector. So, kung kanina meron tayong, asa na yun? So, kanina meron tayong given graph, tapos we identify the direction. Then, to represent it, so for example, given naman ito, paano naman natin siya i-represent dito sa graph? So, ayan na. So, step 1, we create a Cartesian plane. So, it is important to familiarize yourself with the Cartesian plane. Step 2 is using a protractor, measure and mark the angle with respect to the x-axis. So, along the east-west line. So, ayan. Kailangan nyo din ng prior knowledge on how to use protractor. And then step 3 is to draw a line connecting the point of origin and with the markings of the measured angle. So if the magnitude is given, measure it to scale. So measure the length of the vector. So familiarization with the Cartesian plane and on how to use a protractor is helpful in graphically representing a vector. So here we have a Cartesian plane. So this is the y-axis and this is the x-axis. So here is in this direction, it points towards the east, and this direction points towards the west, this points towards the north, and this is south. So the Cartesian plane is divided into 4 quadrants. So the positive side is quadrant 1. So dito yung negative positive side is quadrant 2, negative side is quadrant 3, and positive negative side is quadrant 4. So meron tayong quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and then quadrant 4. So, yan yung description. So, basahin nyo na lang dun sa modules ninyo. So, one rotation or one revolution from the positive axis to, yan, one counterclockwise revolution or kahit clockwise revolution pa yan. So, one revolution or one rotation in the Cartesian plane represents 360 degrees. So, yun ang measurement niya. So, therefore, if we divide it into 4 quadrants, so each quadrant measures 90 degrees. So, the first quadrant is from 0 to 90 degrees. The second quadrant is from 90 degrees to 180 degrees. So, later, pakita ko yung diagram. And then, the third quadrant is from 180 degrees to 270 degrees. And the fourth quadrant is from 270 degrees to 360 degrees. So, later, may kita natin kung bakit kailangan natin i-familiarize also the degrees of each of the line, each of this direction. Okay, so ayan na. So to use a protractor, so wala akong video, so ito na lang. Wait lang. So to use a protractor, ayan. So, ang una nyong gagawin, make sure that ito bagang ito, may cross line siya, or meron doon ng parang line sa baba ng ng protractor, and then, meron yan na cross mark. Yung cross mark. So, the center of that cross, yung iba may butas. So, that represents the point of origin. So, make sure that the horizontal line and the horizontal line and the vertical line aligns with your with the Cartesian plane. So if you want to measure, for example, 10 degrees north of east, so dito, so from this side ang kailangan nyong basahin is itong nasa loob. So, magsisimula ka sa 0 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So, kapag naman, kapag dito, for example, sa kabila naman, so, if you want to determine the angle, if you want to determine the angle, then from 0 degrees, ito naman nasa outer numbers, labels. So, 0 degrees, this is 10 degrees, this is 20 degrees, 30, 40, 50, 60. So, yan ang susundan mo. Kapag baliktad naman, for example, ayan. So, baliktad naman. So, make sure na, ayan, pag binaliktad mo, mababasa mo pa rin yung numbers correctly. So, ito, this is 10 degrees. So, dito naman, magbabase ka sa outer number. So, kapag nasa, quadrant 4 and quadrant 3. Quadrant 4, magbabase ka sa, dito, outer number, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And then, dito naman, sa inner calibration natin. So, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, hanggang 90. So, each of these are 90 degrees. So, the horizontal and vertical line are 90 degrees with respect to each other. And in total, 90 plus 90 plus 90 is equal to 360 degrees. Yeah. So, for example, itong vector natin. Ayan. So, kapag linagay ko siya dito, kapag binasa ko siya, hindi siya 130. Ibig sabihin, 50 degrees siya. So, not 130. Or, for example, ilagay ko siya dito, sa kabila. Ang measure niya is not 120. It is 60 degrees. So, the same with this side. So, for example, in this side, nilagay ko siya, nilagay ko, for example, dito sa gitna na to. So, itong side na to, itong vector na to is 40 degrees with respect to our west line. So, dito naman sa kabila, ibig sabihin nito, this is, kunwari nasa 30. So, ibig sabihin nito that this vector is 30 degrees with respect to the west line. So, ang movement ng pagbilang is from the east-west line. So, 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30. Okay, so example. So graphically represent vector A which is directed 30 degrees north of east. So north of east is found in quadrant 1. So ayan ang ating north of east. So dito, quadrant 1. So ibig sabihin, the direction is north of east. Pero, paano natin i-represent yung 30 degrees north of east? So, we make use of our, tawag dito, protractor. So, dito, I already place a marking. So, from the east line, magbilang tayo ng 30 degrees. So, 10, 20, 30 degrees. So, lagyan mo ng marka, and then, next is to connect. Yan. So, using a ruler. So, kung to scale, for example, may scale na yun na mayroon kayong ratio. For example, for every 1 centimeter, ang ibig sabihin yan ay 1 kilometer, equivalent sa 1 kilometer sa totoong scenario, then, you can already, do it. So, measure nyo na. Habang nagdo-drawing kayo ng vector. So, yan. So, therefore, to represent vector A, which is directed 30 degrees north of east. So, ito yung graphical representation niya. So, ito yung tawag dito? Angle created by vector A with respect to the east line. So, to identify also, or to have an example for the other direction, so other quadrants, so let us look for the following, let us represent the following vectors in our graph. So, vector A is 78 degrees south of east. So, since this is south of east, so, saan yung south? So, ito yung south and this is east. So, ibig sabihin, andito siya mahanap sa quadrant number 4. So, using a protractor, hanapin natin si 78 degrees. So, this is 10, 20, so from the east line, bilang tayo 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then, ayan, so each markings, each graduation is 1 degree. So, therefore, andito si 78 degree. So, markahan nyo na, and then, pagdugtugin nyo na rin. Trace nyo na lang siya. So, therefore, nahuli yung ruler, sorry. This line, so this vector now represents vector A, which is 78 degrees south of east. So, ayan. Yan yung direction niya. So, how about ito? Si B is 39 degrees north of west. Excuse me. So, north of west is found dito sa second quadrant natin. So, this is the west line. So, nasaan ang north ng west line? Andito siya sa quadrant 2. So, next is to measure yung 39 degrees. So, since andyan siya, then, kapag hinanap naman natin siya, ito. So, with respect to the west line, magbilang tayo ng 39 degrees. So, 10, 20, 30, and then 35, and then 36, 37, 38, 39. So, andyan yung 39 degrees. Then, connect the line. So, using a ruler. Yan. Nahuli pa pala yung animation natin. So, ayan na. So, to represent this vector with its direction in a graph, in a diagram. So, ayan na yung kanyang direction. And last, vector C is 15 degrees south of west. So, south of west, this is our west line. Nasa ng south ng west line. So, nasa, andito. So, nasa quadrant 3. So, we need to measure 15 degrees south of west. So, with respect to the west line. So, using our protractor, this is 10 degrees, and then ito, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 degrees. So, this is, so maglagay kayo ng marking dun sa 15 degrees, and then, i-trace nyo na using your ruler. So, yan. Okay, so, this is vector C. So, vector C is 39 degrees or 39 degrees south of the west line. To find so how do we find the direction of vectors with angles in standard form? So, for example, diba, dito, nagbibigay tayo ng direction with, yan, so with north, east, southwest. So, merong association ng north, east, southwest. So, hindi lang basta angle. So, what if the angle given is not with respect to the east-west line, but with respect to the one revolution, one rotation in the Cartesian plane? So, to find the direction of vectors with angles in standard form, we need to solve for the value of the reference angle. So, reference angle, this is the acute angle, smallest positive acute angle with respect to the x-axis or with respect to the east-west line. So, to solve for before we go to the equations for the reference angle or the formula for reference angle. So, ito pala yung kanina. So, again, so review ulit natin yung Cartesian plane. So, it is divided by the vertical y-axis and the horizontal line x-axis. So, each of this, the intersection of this vertical and horizontal line created 4 90-degree angles since they are perpendicular to each other. So, 90 degree plus 90 degree plus 90 degree plus 90 degree is equal to 360 degrees. So, one rotation or one revolution in our Cartesian plane will create 360 degree angle. So, from the east line to the north line, from the east line to the north line. So, meron tayong 0 degree to 90 degree. From the north line to the west line, ang measure natin is 90 degree to 180 degree. And from the west line to the south line, we have 180 degree to 270 degree. And from the south line to the east line, we complete one revolution. So, 270 degree to 360 degrees. So, this angle is with respect to the one rotation or one revolution along the Cartesian plane. So, from positive x moving to the positive x. So, standard angle are angles following the 360 degree angle of one revolution. So, while the reference angle is the smallest positive acute angle with respect to the horizontal axis. So, to look for the reference angle, we can use the following formula. So, depende sa given situation na sa given angle natin. So, if the given standard angle is less than 90 degrees, then our reference angle is equal to the standard angle. So, ibig sabihin niyan, kapag ang angle mo is less than 90 degrees, yun na rin yung reference angle mo. And the location of the vector is in quadrant 1 or in northeast. North of the east line. Kapag yung given angle mo, or if the standard angle is greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees, to look for the value of the reference angle or the smallest positive acute angle, we subtract the standard angle from 180. So 180 degrees minus the given angle is equal to the reference angle. So, in this situation, kapag ganyan, kapag yung angle mo is greater than 90 but is less than 180, then the vector is found in quadrant 2. So, ang quadrant 2, ang direction niya is north of the west line. Kapag naman yung given angle mo is greater than 180 but less than 270 degrees, then to look for the reference angle or the value of the acute angle, we use this equation, so formula. So, given angle or the standard angle minus 180 degrees. So, this situation where the given angle or the standard angle is greater than 180 but less than 270 degrees can be located, the vector can be located in quadrant number 3. So, wherein the description is south of the west line. Kapag naman yung when the given angle is greater than 270 degrees, to look for the reference angle, we subtract the given angle from 360. So, 360 minus the standard angle will yield to the reference angle. So, when standard angle is greater than 270, the vector is found in quadrant 4. So, the description for quadrant 4, the direction is south of the east line. So, let us have the following example. So, find the direction of vector n when n is located at angle of 220 degrees. So, 220 is greater than 180, but 220 is less than 270. So, kung babalik tayo dito sa table natin, ito yung situation natin. So, yung 220 is greater, mas malaki siya kay 180, pero maliit siya kumpara kay 270. Therefore, to find the value of our reference angle, we use this equation. So, reference angle is equal to the given angle minus 180. So, yan. So, 220 degrees, our given angle, which is a standard angle, minus 180 is equal to 40 degrees. So, therefore, the direction of our vector is 40 degrees. So, kung ilalagay natin siya sa i-represent natin siya in a graph. So, ito siya. So, 220, yan yung standard angle natin with respect to 1 revolution. So meaning dito 90 degree, 180 degree, and then 220 degree. So dito natin mahanap yung angle natin. So 220 degree. So we looked for the value of reference angle to describe the direction of vector n. So since andito siya sa quadrant number 3 mahanap, then the direction is south of west, and the value with respect to the west line, the angle created with this by this vector is 40 degrees. Therefore, n is 40 degrees south of west. It is located 40 degrees south of the west line. So for other examples, we have other examples in our saan na yun? Dito ata. Dito. Anyways, nasa ibang nasa kabilatang file. Ano ba tayo ito? Okay, so dun sa module nyo, madami pa dyan example para ma-familiarize nyo din. So, just remember this rule. Kapag ang binigay sa inyo is an angle with respect to the 360 degree. So, paano nyo malalaman na with respect siya to the 360 degree, or paano nyo malalaman na standard angle ang given sa inyo? Hindi siya nagbibigay ng north of east ng location niya ng quadrant. So hindi siya nagbibigay kung north of east ba siya, north of west, or south of east. So yan. So yan yung rule. So yun yung condition, and these are the equations for that rule. So let's discuss the magnitude of a vector. So vector has a magnitude, and if a magnitude is given, we write it using a light-faced letter or the symbol of vector enclosed in vertical bars. So kanina pinakita ko na yan sa inyo. So if the numerical value is given, we write the value. So this is the symbol of the magnitude, representation of the magnitude of a vector. Excuse me. And then, so example. So, vector n is n 40 degrees south of west. So, this is the quantity. Yan, this is the value. Yan, value of the vector. So, kapag sinabi natin magnitude of a vector, it talks about the length of the vector. So, that length can be measured in with different units. Can be associated with different units. So, kapag naman daw numerical value ang binigay, then, we replace the letter with the numerical value. So, for example, vector n is 25 kilometers, 40 degrees south of west. So, yan. So, the length of the vector, the magnitude of a vector is the measure of the length of a vector. So, if a vector is to scale, we can measure the actual magnitude of that vector using a measuring device. So, for example, if 1 kilometer is scaled to 1 centimeter, then in a ruler, every 1 centimeter is equivalent to 1 kilometer. So, kapag ang vector mo is 2 centimeters long, ibig sabihin sa totoong in real situation, so in real situation, that corresponds to 2 kilometers. So ganon. So you can also use other units here. So for example, 1 centimeter is equivalent to 1 newton. So yun lang. And then ayan, so for example, we have an arrow that is 4 centimeters long. So ibig sabihin, kapag measure mo yung arrow using a ruler and then 4 centimeters long siya, then that means that our arrow is 4 kilometers in real life. So, di ba, kapag sa totoong buhay, kapag tayo nagdo-drawing, di ba? Hindi naman natin ma-measure yung 1 kilometer sa bond paper, for example. So, this concept is also used in maps. For example, dito, ayan, so meron tayong mga, ano yung tawag dito? Yan, mga scales. Asan bang pinaka? Yan, so for example, ito. So, every graduation, this means that this is equivalent to kilometers. Kapag mineasure mo siya, it is equivalent to kilometers. The same with this one. So, mga scale sa map natin. So, dito, every 1 cm, yung scale natin is 1 cm is to 1 kilometer. So, meaning, every 1 centimeters in our ruler is equivalent to 1 kilometer. So, pwede rin naman na every 1/2 centimeter or every 0.5 cm is equivalent to 1 kilometer. So, kayong bahala kung paano nyo gustong i-scale yung mga measurement natin. So, there are different types. So, 4 types of vectors. First is the equal vectors. Equal vectors are when two vectors are equal if they have the same magnitude and direction. So, in graphical representation, so ganyan. So, the direction of the vectors are pointing, so that the vectors are pointing towards the same direction. So, equal yung direction, ay the same direction, and then the same din yung magnitude. So, ito, 4 kilometers, yung vector A, and 4 kilometers yung vector B, they are pointing towards the east side, both of them. Therefore, vector A and vector B are equal. So, pwede rin naman silang equal sila, pero pointing towards the north. So, dapat the same direction and the same magnitude. The second type of vector is the parallel vector. So, two vectors are parallel if they have the same direction but may have different magnitude. So, they are pointing towards the same direction pero yung isa mas mahaba, yung isa mas maikli. For example, vector A is 3 kilometers towards east, then vector B is 4 kilometers towards the east. So, they are parallel vectors since they are pointing towards the same direction. Anti-parallel naman ng vectors if they have an angle between, if the angle between the vectors is, bakit 1,800? So, 180 degrees. So, degrees dapat to. If the angle between the vectors is 180 degrees or if they are pointing towards the polar opposite of each other. So, for example, itong isa is pointing towards the west while the other one is pointing towards the east. So, pwede rin naman, yan. So, yan. This is also an example of anti-parallel. So, or yung isa pointing towards the north, yung isa pointing towards the south. Or pwede rin naman yung ganito. So, asan na yun? So, pwede rin naman na ganyan. So, yung isa pointing towards the south of west, yung isa pointing towards the north of east. So, these are anti-parallel vectors. And the last type of vector is, so before we go to the last type of vector, so equal vectors, parallel vectors, and anti-parallel vectors are collinear vectors. So, ibig sabihin, the vectors lie in the same line of action. So, for example, ito ang line of action. So, yan. So, pareho silang horizontal. O kaya pareho silang ang nakadiagonal. Okay, pareho silang vertical vectors. Ganon. So, the last type of vector is the non-collinear vector. So, two vectors are non-collinear if they are on the same plane but not acting on the same line of action. So, these vectors are separated by an angle that is not equal to 0 and not equal to 180 degrees. So for example, is the right vectors separated by 90-degree angle. So yung isa pointing towards the north, yung isa naman pointing towards the east, or pwedeng kahit saang direction as long as right angle. So any vector separated by a right angle or separated by 90 degrees are non-collinear vectors. So any vectors that are perpendicular to each other are non-collinear vectors. So any vectors divided or separated by an acute angle. So pag sinabi nating acute angle, those are angles that are less than 90 degrees. So, for example, 45, 89, and below. So yun. Pero not equal to 0. So acute angle, vectors that are separated by an acute angle is a non-collinear vectors. And the same with the obtuse angle. So two vectors separated by an obtuse angle. So kapag obtuse, those are angles that are greater than 90 degrees. So 91, 92, 93, 94, but not equal to 180 degrees. So yun. So any two vectors separated by an obtuse angle is a non-collinear vectors. So that is all for this part 2 of vectors. So in our next video, we're going to discuss vector addition and then representing vectors in component form. So paano tayo mag-add ng vectors, adding two vectors or adding two or more vectors, and how do we use the different methods of vector addition. So thank you for listening.